The sound of the piano rose through the thin apartment walls like a storm, loud, powerful, full of feelings too big for such a small home. It wasn't the usual soft practice music the neighbors had heard before. This was different. It was bold, angry, and heartbreaking all at once. And it came from the hands of a 12-year-old black girl named Maya Carter, who played as if the world itself needed her song. Down the hallway, angry knocks began. Doors opened. Voices rose. She's too loud again. Someone needs to make her stop. I can't even hear myself think. But while the neighbors argued, none of them noticed the quiet figure slowly creeping up the stairs outside. A small shadow paused near Maya's door. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all. Someone who had been listening from the parking lot and followed the music. Someone who knew the truth behind why Maya played like that tonight. The footsteps stopped right outside her apartment. The doorknob turned. And just as Maya struck the last heavy note, the door slowly began to open from the outside. Who was listening? And why had they followed the sound into the building? Before any answers could come, everything froze. Earlier that week, the story had begun in a much quieter way. It started with Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the oldest resident in the Maple Grove apartments. Everyone simply called her Miss Ellie. She was 83, small as a sparrow, and moved with a soft shuffle, one hand always gripping her cane, the other holding a grocery bag filled mostly with canned soup and crossword books. Miss Ellie lived alone on the 3rd floor, right below the Carter family. Every morning at 7:30 she made tea, opened her window and waited for the same sound. Gentle piano notes drifting down from upstairs. Maya practiced every morning before school, filling the building with tiny pieces of sunshine. Miss Ellie loved it. While others rolled their eyes or turned up their TVs, Miss Ellie smiled, closed her eyes and let the music fill her heart. It reminded her of her late husband, who used to play jazz in old nightclubs across Chicago. But not everyone felt that way. Across the hall lived Mr. Jacobs, a man who complained if a leaf dared fall too loudly. Next to him Mrs. Turner, who kept headphones around her neck just so she could slam them on whenever Maya touched a key. And downstairs the Harris brothers, who worked night shifts and hated being woken up by anything, even birds. For a long time things stayed peaceful. The complaints were only whispers, and Miss Ellie always defended Maya. She's a good kid, she would say. Music hurts no one. But then everything changed the afternoon Maya started practicing a new song. One that filled the building with a deeper, stronger sound. It was the day she got home early from school, rushing inside with her backpack bouncing behind her. She didn't greet any of the neighbors. She didn't even stop for a snack. She simply pushed the piano bench forward, placed her shaking fingers on the keys, and began to play hard, loud, and fast. The music echoed through the walls like a cry for help. Miss Ellie, resting in her rocking chair, felt her heart squeeze. "That's not practice music," she whispered. "That's a child trying to say something." But the neighbors didn't hear the pain. They heard noise. "That kid is out of control. I'm reporting this. Today. Someone has to talk to her mother." And by evening, the complaints had grown into full arguments. People gathered in the hallway, grumbling and pointing toward the Carters' apartment door. Miss Ellie stepped out too, her cane tapping the floor. "She's just a girl," she said softly. "Maybe we should ask what's wrong." But no one listened. They only heard the music pounding through the walls like thunder. Meanwhile, upstairs Maya kept playing. Hands trembling, eyes wet, heartbroken. She wasn't trying to bother anyone. She just needed the piano more than she had ever needed it before. It was the only place she felt like she could breathe. A less extreme moment came earlier that morning, when Maya had walked to school with her best friend, Lucy Adams, a quiet girl with curly blonde hair and a smile that always seemed half shy. They talked about their usual things. Homework, lunch snacks, and the talent show coming up in a few weeks. "You should totally play piano," Lucy had said, nudging her. "No, I don't think so," Maya answered, kicking a pebble on the sidewalk. "Why not? People won't care." Lucy frowned. "Your music is amazing. People will care." But Maya only shrugged and changed the topic. She didn't feel amazing. She didn't feel special. And she didn't feel like facing hundreds of faces staring at her. At school, her teachers noticed something was different too. She was quiet, distracted. When she looked out the window, her face carried a sadness she didn't want anyone to ask about. But nobody pushed her. Nobody knew what had happened the night before. Only Maya knew. Only she understood why her chest felt heavy, and why the piano was the only place where her feelings made sense. And only one other person had overheard that sad conversation in the parking lot, the one that had broken Maya's heart. That person had followed the sound of her music tonight to find out the truth. And that person was now standing outside her apartment door. As the neighbors' angry voices grew and footsteps gathered in the hallway, Miss Ellie held her breath. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. It wasn't just noise now. It felt like something bigger was coming. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered. Everyone stopped speaking. A strange silence filled the air. And then, a loud crash came from inside the Carter apartment. Something or someone had fallen. Miss Ellie gasped. Neighbors froze. And the door to Maya's home stood halfway open, a shadow moving inside. The extreme moment hit like lightning. A voice from inside the apartment shouted, "Someone help!" And then everything went silent again. The hallway seemed to stretch forever as Miss Ellie shuffled forward, her cane tapping in tiny, hesitant rhythms on the linoleum floor. The neighbors had stopped arguing, frozen in place like statues, their anger replaced with confusion and fear. That crash from inside the Carter apartment echoed in their minds, bouncing off the walls and making their hearts pound. The faint smell of something burnt lingered in the air, probably from the piano keys or maybe a candle that had fallen during the commotion. No one knew. The sound of the piano rose through the thin apartment walls like a storm, loud, powerful, full of feelings too big for such a small home. It wasn't the usual soft practice music the neighbors had heard before. This was different. It was bold, angry, and heartbreaking all at once. And it came from the hands of a 12-year-old black girl named Maya Carter, who played as if the world itself needed her song. Down the hallway, angry knocks began. Doors opened. Voices rose. She's too loud again. Someone needs to make her stop. I can't even hear myself think. But while the neighbors argued, none of them noticed the quiet figure slowly creeping up the stairs outside. A small shadow paused near Maya's door. Someone who wasn't supposed to be there at all. Someone who had been listening from the parking lot and followed the music. Someone who knew the truth behind why Maya played like that tonight. The footsteps stopped right outside her apartment. The doorknob turned. And just as Maya struck the last heavy note, the door slowly began to open from the outside. Who was listening? And why had they followed the sound into the building? Before any answers could come, everything froze. Earlier that week, the story had begun in a much quieter way. It started with Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, the oldest resident in the Maple Grove apartments. Everyone simply called her Miss Ellie. She was 83, small as a sparrow, and moved with a soft shuffle, one hand always gripping her cane, the other holding a grocery bag filled mostly with canned soup and crossword books. Miss Ellie lived alone on the third floor, right below the Carter family. Every morning at 7:30 she made tea, opened her window and waited for the same sound. Gentle piano notes drifting down from upstairs. Maya practiced every morning before school, filling the building with tiny pieces of sunshine. Miss Ellie loved it. While others rolled their eyes or turned up their TVs, Miss Ellie smiled, closed her eyes and let the music fill her heart. It reminded her of her late husband, who used to play jazz in old nightclubs across Chicago. But not everyone felt that way. Across the hall lived Mr. Jacobs, a man who complained if a leaf dared fall too loudly. Next to him Mrs. Turner, who kept headphones around her neck just so she could slam them on whenever Maya touched a key. And downstairs the Harris brothers, who worked night shifts and hated being woken up by anything, even birds. For a long time things stayed peaceful. The complaints were only whispers, and Miss Ellie always defended Maya. "She's a good kid," she would say. "Music hurts no one." But then everything changed the afternoon Maya started practicing a new song. One that filled the building with a deeper, stronger sound. It was the day she got home early from school, rushing inside with her backpack bouncing behind her. She didn't greet any of the neighbors. She didn't even stop for a snack. She simply pushed the piano bench forward, placed her shaking fingers on the keys, and began to play hard, loud, and fast. The music echoed through the walls like a cry for help. Miss Ellie, resting in her rocking chair, felt her heart squeeze. "That's not practice music," she whispered. "That's a child trying to say something." But the neighbors didn't hear the pain. They heard noise. "That kid is out of control. I'm reporting this. Today. Someone has to talk to her mother." And by evening, the complaints had grown into full arguments. People gathered in the hallway, grumbling and pointing toward the Carters' apartment door. Miss Ellie stepped out too, her cane tapping the floor. "She's just a girl," she said softly. "Maybe we should ask what's wrong." But no one listened. They only heard the music pounding through the walls like thunder. Meanwhile, upstairs Maya kept playing. Hands trembling, eyes wet, heartbroken. She wasn't trying to bother anyone. She just needed the piano more than she had ever needed it before. It was the only place she felt like she could breathe. A less extreme moment came earlier that morning, when Maya had walked to school with her best friend, Lucy Adams, a quiet girl with curly blonde hair and a smile that always seemed half shy. They talked about their usual things. Homework, lunch snacks, and the talent show coming up in a few weeks. "You should totally play piano," Lucy had said, nudging her. "No, I don't think so," Maya answered, kicking a pebble on the sidewalk. "Why not? People won't care." Lucy frowned. "Your music is amazing. People will care." But Maya only shrugged and changed the topic. She didn't feel amazing. She didn't feel special. And she didn't feel like facing hundreds of faces staring at her. At school, her teachers noticed something was different too. She was quiet, distracted. When she looked out the window, her face carried a sadness she didn't want anyone to ask about. But nobody pushed her. Nobody knew what had happened the night before. Only Maya knew. Only she understood why her chest felt heavy, and why the piano was the only place where her feelings made sense. And only one other person had overheard that sad conversation in the parking lot, the one that had broken Maya's heart. That person had followed the sound of her music tonight to find out the truth. And that person was now standing outside her apartment door. As the neighbors' angry voices grew and footsteps gathered in the hallway, Miss Ellie held her breath. Something felt wrong. Very wrong. It wasn't just noise now. It felt like something bigger was coming. Suddenly, the hallway lights flickered. Everyone stopped speaking. A strange silence filled the air. And then, a loud crash came from inside the Carter apartment. Something or someone had fallen. Miss Ellie gasped. Neighbors froze. And the door to Maya's home stood halfway open, a shadow moving inside. The extreme moment hit like lightning. A voice from inside the apartment shouted, "Someone help!" And then everything went silent again. The hallway seemed to stretch forever as Miss Ellie shuffled forward, her cane tapping in tiny, hesitant rhythms on the linoleum floor. The neighbors had stopped arguing, frozen in place like statues, their anger replaced with confusion and fear. That crash from inside the Carter apartment echoed in their minds, bouncing off the walls and making their hearts pound. The faint smell of something burnt lingered in the air, probably from the piano keys or maybe a candle that had fallen during the commotion. No one knew. The neighbors, for once, didn't argue. They didn't complain. They just stared, frozen in fear, as the shadows in the apartment complex seemed to grow longer and darker. And in that silence, the faint echo of Maya's piano lingered. A warning, a plea, and a promise all at once. The clang on the fire escape rattled through the entire building like a warning bell. Even the usually stoic Mr. Jacobs jumped, his cane clattering to the floor. Maya froze, fingers hovering above the piano keys, her heart hammering so loudly she could barely hear the soft hum of the apartment lights. Lucy clutched her hand tighter, fear mirrored in her wide eyes. "Stay here," Miss Ellie said, her voice firmer than usual. The old woman gripped her cane with both hands, leaning forward as she slowly shuffled toward the stairwell. Her instincts told her that whatever had fallen from the roof wasn't random. It was a message. The neighbors, now fully awake to the tension, followed hesitantly. Even the Harris brothers, who normally avoided trouble, moved to peek over the railing of the stairs. When Miss Ellie reached the top of the stairs, she froze. Something had indeed fallen from the roof, an old, dusty music box, its glass cracked and wood chipped. It had landed at the foot of the fire escape, but what was strange was not the object itself. It was the note attached. A single folded piece of paper fluttered in the evening wind. Miss Ellie carefully picked it up and unfolded it. The handwriting was elegant, almost old-fashioned, yet deliberate. The music she plays, it reaches more than just ears. Be careful who listens. Her hands trembled. More than just ears, she whispered, reading the words over and over. What could that mean? Maya, still inside, pressed her hands to her chest. She felt a chill run down her spine. It's about me, she whispered. It's about my music. Lucy's voice was barely audible. Do you think someone's watching you? Listening. Before Maya could respond, a sudden banging at the apartment door startled everyone. It was louder this time, more insistent, as though the person or people outside wanted to break in. Miss Ellie motioned for everyone to stay back. She placed herself between the door and the hallway. We need to stay calm. Whoever it is, they won't get in if we don't panic. The banging continued for several moments, each knock reverberating through the thin walls. Maya, trembling now, leaned heavily on the piano. The neighbors were frozen in place, their usual complaints and arguments completely forgotten in the face of real fear. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. Silence fell over the hallway. The faint hum of the apartment lights was the only sound. But it wasn't a comforting silence. It was heavy, tense, full of unspoken questions. Maya swallowed hard. What do we do now? Miss Ellie shook her head. We wait. But we must be careful. Whoever is out there, they know you. They've been listening. The neighbors looked at each other, uncertainty in their eyes. For the first time, they realized that the girl they had been complaining about, the one they had labeled too loud, was the center of something far larger than they had imagined. A less extreme moment followed, as they all settled into a tense, uneasy silence. Miss Ellie guided Maya and Lucy to sit near the piano, keeping them close. The neighbors lingered just outside the apartment, whispering among themselves. Maybe we judged her too quickly, Mrs. Turner said quietly, almost ashamed. I didn't know her music. I didn't understand. Mr. Jacobs grunted but didn't argue. Even he seemed to be reconsidering the complaints he had made for months about the noise. Miss Ellie gave a small nod. Music is powerful. Carries more than just notes. It carries feelings, it carries stories, sometimes even warnings. Maya pressed her fingers to the keys again, hesitant at first, then slowly allowing a soft melody to fill the room. The notes were trembling, fragile, but they carried a quiet strength that made everyone pause. Even the neighbors outside the door listened. For a few moments, the building was quiet in a different way. Not fearfully quiet, but attentive. The music had changed something in the air, and everyone felt it. But just when it seemed like the tension might ease, a sudden screeching sound came from the fire escape outside the window. Something or someone was climbing down, metal scraping metal, steps trembling with every movement. Everyone froze. Maya's hands flew from the keys, Lucy clutched her arm tightly, and Miss Ellie gripped her cane as though it were a weapon. From the top of the stairwell, the shadow emerged. It was taller now, broader, its face hidden in darkness. Its movements were deliberate, calculated, and it seemed to be heading straight for Maya's apartment door. Who is that? Lucy whispered, her voice trembling. Miss Ellie didn't answer. She simply moved closer to Maya, shielding her with her frail body as the figure drew nearer. The neighbors, now fully awake to the danger, were frozen in fear. Even Mr. Jacobs, who normally liked to control every situation, couldn't bring himself to speak. The shadow reached the door. A hand appeared, long and thin, pressing against the wood. Maya's heart raced faster than it ever had. She could hear her own breath, shallow and panicked. Suddenly the figure paused. Something about the piano notes inside seemed to stop it, as though the music had power beyond understanding. The fingers on the keys trembled, playing a melody soft and haunting, reaching out into the hallway. Then, without warning, the shadow suddenly retreated. It climbed back up the fire escape with terrifying speed, disappearing into the darkness above. Everyone let out a collective breath they hadn't realized they were holding. Maya collapsed into the piano bench, trembling. Lucy held her tight, whispering comfort. Miss Ellie, leaning heavily on her cane, shook her head slowly. They're not gone, she said quietly. They're still out there. And they're listening. The neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, realizing that what they had dismissed as too much noise might have been a shield, a way to protect Maya from someone who was paying far too much attention. Maya's hands hovered above the piano keys, her mind racing. Why me? She whispered. Why my music? Miss Ellie reached over, resting a hand on Maya's shoulder. Because, my dear, sometimes music chooses its listener, and sometimes it reveals things no one expects. You've touched someone, or something that notices. Lucy squeezed her hand tighter. We'll figure it out, she said. Together. But even as they spoke, the building felt smaller, colder. The music echoed through the walls, reaching places that none of them could see. And somewhere in the darkness above, the figure lingered, waiting, listening, its motives unknown. The extreme moment had passed for now, but the threat was far from over. The shadows outside promised that the next encounter would be even closer, more immediate, and far more dangerous. And Maya, sitting at the piano, knew that her music had become something more than practice. It had become a signal, a beacon, and perhaps a warning. A single thought ran through her mind as the final notes of her trembling melody faded into silence. They're coming back. And next time, I might not be ready. The next morning, the Maple Grove apartments felt different. Even the usual sounds of children laughing outside or dogs barking seemed muted, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Maya hadn't slept well. She had stayed up late, staring at the piano keys, thinking about the shadow that had appeared on the fire escape. Her hands itched to play, but every time she pressed a key, the memory of that figure made her tremble. Lucy sat beside her, holding a cup of warm cocoa. You can do this, she said softly. You have to keep playing. It's not just about music anymore. It's about, well, I don't know, defending yourself maybe. Maya let out a shaky laugh. Defend myself? I'm just a kid. You're not just a kid, Lucy said firmly. You're Maya Carter. And right now, your music is the only thing that matters. Miss Ellie shuffled into the room, cane tapping gently on the floor. She's right, the old woman said. Your music has power, Maya, but you need to be careful. Someone is out there who notices every note you play. We don't know their intentions yet. Maya nodded slowly, swallowing her fear. She pressed her fingers to the piano keys again, tentative at first, letting a soft melody fill the apartment. The notes drifted through the walls and into the hallway, as neighbors peeked out from their doors, listening quietly, unsure of what to make of it. The soft music seemed to calm some of the anger from the day before. Mr. Jacobs, who had been pacing nervously, stopped and frowned at the sound. Mrs. Turner pulled her headphones off, leaning on her doorframe. Even the Harris brothers paused in their conversation, listening. For a brief moment there was peace. But then, another extreme event shook everything. A loud crash came from the street outside, followed by shouting. Miss Ellie rushed to the window, peering out through the thin glass. Her eyes widened in shock. A delivery truck had collided with a parked car right in front of the building. Broken glass sparkled on the pavement. The sound of the crash had startled Maya, who had jumped back from the piano. Lucy grabbed her arm to steady her. Oh no, Miss Ellie whispered. That's not just an accident. The neighbors hurried outside to see what had happened, some angry, some curious, but all distracted from the earlier tension. Maya's music, which had been a shield, had been drowned out by the chaos outside. Maya's mother, Vanessa Carter, appeared moments later, rushing from her apartment. Maya, are you okay? She shouted, panic in her voice. Seeing her daughter trembling near the piano, she ran over and hugged her tightly. I'm fine, Mom, Maya said, though her voice quivered. It's just scary. Vanessa looked at the piano, at the scattered music sheets, and then at the broken windows on the street. We need to be careful, she said, pulling Maya closer. Something's going on, and I don't think it's just bad luck. Miss Ellie, standing nearby, nodded. You're right. Something is paying attention to her music. Maybe more than anyone realizes. Lucy, still holding Maya's hand, whispered. Do you think it's the same person from the fire escape? Maya shook her head. I don't know. But I don't want them to hurt anyone. The day passed slowly, the neighbors now more aware of Maya's situation than ever before. Some felt guilty for their previous complaints, realizing they had underestimated her courage and the importance of her music. Others simply watched from the safety of their apartments, unsure how to act but curious nonetheless. By evening, Maya returned to the piano. The adrenaline from the truck crash had subsided, leaving a lingering tension that made her hands tremble. She sat down slowly, fingers hovering over the keys. Lucy stayed beside her, her presence a comforting anchor. Miss Ellie, leaning on her cane, whispered, "Play for me, Maya. Play like you've never played before. Let them hear you." Maya took a deep breath and began. At first, the notes were quiet, almost fragile. But gradually the melody grew stronger, filled with emotion, anger, sadness, and hope. It was as if she was telling the story of everything that had happened. The shadow on the fire escape, the crash outside, the fear she felt, and the courage she was finding within herself. As she played, the neighbors stopped whatever they were doing to listen. Even Mr. Jacobs, who normally scowled at noise, leaned on his doorframe, captivated. Mrs. Turner's eyes softened as she realized how much depth and meaning the music carried. For a short while, the apartment was filled with a strange peace. Maya's hands danced across the keys, her music a protective shield against the world outside. But peace didn't last long. Suddenly, the lights flickered violently. A loud bang came from the hallway outside the apartment. Maya jumped, nearly falling off the piano bench. Lucy grabbed her just in time. Miss Ellie, leaning heavily on her cane, stepped toward the door. "It's happening again," she whispered. "They're trying to scare us." Maya's hands froze mid-note. Her chest felt tight, panic threatening to overtake her. Who is doing this?" she asked, voice trembling. Miss Ellie shook her head. "I don't know. But we can't let fear control us. Your music is your strength, Maya. Remember that." The neighbors, too, seemed to understand that this was bigger than petty complaints. Whatever was happening now, it was not just about noise. It was about someone or something reacting to Maya's music. Maya pressed her fingers to the keys again, letting the melody continue despite the fear that clawed at her chest. Lucy whispered encouragement, and Miss Ellie kept watch at the door, cane in hand, ready for whatever might come next. And just when they began to feel slightly safer, a shadow appeared at the end of the hallway. A figure taller than anyone, its face still hidden in darkness, slowly advanced toward Maya's apartment. The neighbors gasped. Maya's hands trembled, hovering over the piano. The figure stopped for a moment, then slowly raised one hand, as if signaling something. And then the lights in the entire building went out. Pitch black. Silence. Maya's heart raced. Lucy clutched her hand tighter. Miss Ellie gritted her teeth. The neighbors froze. A voice, low and chilling, whispered from the darkness, "You cannot hide from what listens." The extreme moment had returned, more terrifying than ever. Maya's music, which had always been her comfort, now felt like a spotlight on a danger she could not see. The darkness in the Maple Grove apartments was suffocating. Every sound seemed sharper, louder, every creak, every shuffle, every whisper amplified in the pitch-black hallways. Maya sat frozen at the piano, her fingers hovering above the keys. Her heart pounded so loudly she feared the shadow outside could hear it, could track it, could somehow reach through the walls. Lucy squeezed her hand, whispering, "It's okay, Maya. We're together. You can do this." Miss Ellie, leaning heavily on her cane, had her back pressed against the apartment door, her ears straining for any sound. The neighbors had retreated to their doorways, their earlier complaints about noise completely forgotten. Now they were witnesses to something far more frightening, a presence that no one fully understood. The chilling voice from before repeated, softer this time but still terrifying, "You cannot hide from what listens." Maya swallowed hard, feeling the tremor in her chest grow stronger. The shadow didn't move forward, yet its presence pressed on the apartment like a weight, heavy and oppressive. She took a deep breath and forced her fingers to the keys, letting the music flow. This time the melody was slow, steady, deliberate. She played carefully, each note carrying her fear, her hope, and her courage. The notes drifted through the darkness. The shadow paused as though listening, reacting. And then it shifted. A soft scraping sound echoed in the hallway. Something metal scraped against the wall. The shadow moved closer. "Stay calm," Miss Ellie whispered to Maya. "Music is your shield. Let it guide you." Maya nodded, her fingers trembling but refusing to stop. Each note now felt purposeful, as though she was communicating directly with the figure outside. The voice had warned them. The shadow was reacting. She realized that the music wasn't just notes, it was protection, a form of understanding. Outside in the hallway, The neighbors began to notice the difference. Mr. Jacobs, usually the most impatient and irritable, whispered, She's controlling it somehow with her music." Mrs. Turner, headphones still dangling around her neck, nodded slowly. "It's like the notes are talking." Even the Harris brothers were silent, leaning against their doors wide-eyed. The atmosphere had shifted. Maya was no longer just a noisy girl playing piano. She was something else entirely. A force that had power even in the presence of danger. But then, an extreme event shattered the fragile calm. A loud crash came from the window. Glass shattered. Cold wind rushed into the apartment. Maya screamed, clutching the piano bench. Lucy held her tight, shielding her from the broken shards. Miss Ellie swung her cane at the doorway instinctively, her old joints protesting, but the shadow remained outside, unfazed. Through the broken window, a dark figure could be seen for the first time. It was tall, hooded, almost impossibly thin, moving with a silent grace that made every instinct scream danger. Its hand pressed against the broken glass, tapping lightly as though following the rhythm of Maya's music. "You cannot run," the whisper came again, carried through the wind. "You cannot hide from what listens." Maya's hands shook, but she forced them back to the keys. She played louder this time, a bold, urgent melody that filled every corner of the apartment. Each note was a challenge, a warning, a plea. The shadow hesitated, then tilted its head, listening intently. Miss Ellie, sensing a moment of opportunity, whispered, "Maya, push them back. Show them you're not afraid." Maya inhaled deeply. Her fingers flew across the keys, faster now, pounding chords that vibrated through the walls. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if repelled by the sound. Then it vanished, suddenly, completely, leaving the broken glass rattling in the empty frame. For a few moments the apartment was silent except for Maya's heavy breathing. The neighbors slowly exhaled, their fear mingling with awe. That was incredible," Lucy said softly, still clutching Maya's hand. You did it," Miss Ellie said, her voice trembling with pride and relief. "You scared it away. Your music, it protected you." Maya sat back, trembling. She didn't feel victorious. She felt exhausted. Her fingers were sore, her heart raced, but there was a tiny spark of hope inside her. She realized that her music had a power she had never imagined, a power that could reach beyond walls, beyond fear, beyond even shadows. But the calm didn't last long. A less extreme moment followed. Vanessa Carter, Maya's mother, finally entered the apartment, her face pale but resolute. "Maya, are you all right?" she asked, hugging her tightly. I heard everything. "I'm fine," Maya whispered, her voice shaking. "It's over for now." Vanessa looked at the broken window and the scattered music sheets. "We need to be careful," she said. "I don't know who or what that was, but we have to protect ourselves." Miss Ellie nodded. "Yes, and we will. But we also need to remember. This music is her gift. It's powerful, and it's part of who she is. We mustn't try to stop it or hide it." Lucy squeezed Maya's hand again. "We'll figure this out together," she said. "We just have to be smart." The neighbors, now gathered in the hallway, seemed to understand the gravity of the situation. They no longer complained about the noise or judged Maya for being too loud. They had seen something beyond ordinary life, something that demanded respect and caution. But just when it seemed like a moment of peace might settle, another extreme event shook the building. A loud scream echoed from the roof. It wasn't human. It was a strange, distorted sound like a mix of wind, metal, and anger. The lights flickered again, and the building seemed to shiver under the sound. Maya's hands froze on the piano keys. Lucy clutched her arm. Miss Ellie's cane trembled in her grip. The neighbors recoiled, fear flashing across their faces. Maya whispered, trembling, "It's coming back. It knows I'm here." Miss Ellie nodded grimly. "Yes. And next time it won't be so easily pushed away." The piano's soft hum hung in the air, fragile yet defiant. The shadow outside was more than just a threat now. It was a presence that had marked Maya, following her music, waiting for the right moment. And as the distorted scream continued from the roof, Maya understood something crucial. Her music was not just a gift. It was a weapon, a shield, and a beacon all at once. And she was the only one who could wield it. The extreme moment had returned with terrifying intensity, leaving everyone in the Maple Grove apartments suspended between fear and awe. The next morning, the Maple Grove apartments felt tense and heavy, as though the walls themselves remembered the screams and crashes from the night before. Maya woke to the soft glow of sunlight streaming through the broken window, casting jagged shadows across her piano. Her fingers itched to play, but a mix of fear and uncertainty held her back. Every note she struck yesterday had felt like both a victory and a warning. Lucy sat beside her, flipping through a notebook filled with doodles and scribbled notes. "We need a plan," she said quietly. "We can't just wait for it to come back. We have to understand it. Figure out what it wants." Maya nodded, swallowing hard. Her mother, Vanessa, appeared in the doorway, looking pale but determined. "I've called the police," she said. "I don't know if they'll believe us about a shadow and strange noises, but at least they'll check the building." Miss Ellie shuffled over, leaning on her cane. "It's not just the police, Vanessa. This presence, it's not something ordinary. It reacts to music. It listens. It waits. You can't handle it the way you handle an ordinary threat." Maya's heart raced. "So what do I do?" "You play," Miss Ellie said simply. "Your music is the key. But this time you have to play smarter, not just louder." Lucy leaned closer. "We need to know who's listening. Maybe if we understand them, we can stop them." The idea gave Maya hope. The fear hadn't gone away, but now there was a way forward. She pressed her fingers to the piano keys, slowly at first, letting the music rise gently. The melody was soft and careful, unlike yesterday's urgent pounding. Each note was like a question, asking the shadow who it was and why it had come. Outside, the hallway remained empty, the neighbors watching quietly from their doors. Even Mr. Jacobs and Mrs. Turner seemed to be on edge, their earlier complaints about noise replaced by a mix of awe and fear. Then it happened. From somewhere above, possibly the roof, a faint, distorted melody responded. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but Maya heard it. The notes were dark, low, twisted, like a mirror of her own melody but warped. Her hands froze above the keys. "It's answering you," Lucy whispered, eyes wide. Maya's fingers trembled but didn't move. She had never heard anything like this before. The shadow's music was deliberate. It was intelligent. It was alive. Miss Ellie gritted her teeth. "They're not just listening. They're communicating." Maya took a shaky breath and played again, this time blending her own melody with the dark echoes. She tried to coax the shadow to understand its intentions. Each note she played carried emotion. Fear, sadness, hope, and even a little defiance. Minutes passed. The tension in the apartment was unbearable. The neighbors leaned closer to their doors, listening. Some whispered. Some held their hands over their mouths in disbelief. And then the shadow appeared. Unlike before, it didn't crash or knock. It didn't scream. It simply emerged from the darkness of the hallway, pale and ghostly, its hood pulled back just enough to reveal its face, or rather its mask. It was featureless, smooth and dark like polished stone. Its eyes, if they could be called eyes, were two deep hollows that seemed to look directly into Maya's soul. "You can see me now," it said, its voice low and hollow yet melodic, echoing like a song through the apartment. "I have listened for a long time." Maya's hands hovered above the keys. What are you?" she asked, her voice shaking. "I am the listener," it said simply. "I follow music that carries truth. Your music, it carries much more than noise. Carries feeling. Pain. Courage." Miss Ellie stepped forward, cane tapping the floor. "Why are you here? Why her?" The shadow tilted its head, as though considering her question. "Because she plays with honesty. With heart. With power. Others hide their emotions. She does not. Her music. It cannot be ignored." Lucy whispered. "So, it's not trying to hurt her?" The shadow's voice softened. "I am neither friend nor enemy. I am drawn to music. I follow it. I listen. And sometimes, I protect it." Maya's chest tightened. She realized that all the crashes, the screams, the darkness, perhaps they weren't meant to harm her but to test her, to see if her music was strong enough, pure enough to command attention. "But why scare us?" Maya asked. "Why the crashes and the noises?" The shadow paused. "Fear sharpens the mind. It awakens the senses. It ensures that only those who are worthy may continue. Your music is powerful. It will attract attention. Not all who listen will understand. Some may seek to control it. Some may seek to destroy it. Maya swallowed hard. So what do I do? Play, the shadow said. Always play. Let your music speak the truth of your heart. But be vigilant. Not everyone will welcome it. Miss Ellie, sensing the danger in the words, nodded solemnly. You must be careful, Maya. Your gift is rare, but it will bring challenges. You will need allies. You will need courage. Lucy squeezed Maya's hand. We'll face it together. We won't let it overwhelm you. Maya looked down at the piano, her fingers hovering over the keys. A newfound determination filled her chest. I can do this, she whispered. I can protect my music. And I can protect myself. The shadow began to fade, retreating slowly into the darkness of the hallway. Its final words echoed through the apartment. Remember, I listen. I am always near. But I am not your enemy, unless you let fear guide you instead of courage. And then it was gone. A less extreme moment followed as the tension began to ease. Maya's neighbors, who had witnessed the encounter, whispered among themselves. Mr. Jacobs even nodded toward her, a gesture of respect rather than irritation. Mrs. Turner's eyes were wide with awe. The Harris brothers simply shook their heads, speechless. Miss Ellie placed a reassuring hand on Maya's shoulder. You've done well, my dear. You faced something most adults could not even imagine. And you survived. Maya smiled weakly, feeling the weight of the night lifting slightly. I don't feel like a regular kid anymore, she admitted. You're not, Miss Ellie said. You never were. And your music, it proves it. Lucy grinned. And we'll make sure everyone knows it, in the right way. Your music will be your voice. Maya pressed her fingers to the keys once more, playing a soft, steady melody that filled the apartment. It was no longer frantic or defensive. It was confident, strong, beautiful. Outside, the hallway lights flickered once, as if the building itself was acknowledging the music. Somewhere in the shadows a presence lingered, but this time it felt different. Observant, yes. Still cautious. Still unknown. But not immediately threatening. Maya realized something profound. The shadow had tested her, but it had also given her a gift. The knowledge that her music mattered, that it could reach beyond walls, beyond fear, and even beyond understanding. The extreme danger had passed for now, but the lessons remained. Maya's music was no longer just a pastime, it was a force, and she had to be ready for what came next. The following days at Maple Grove Apartments were filled with a tense, quiet vigilance. Maya returned to the piano each morning, slowly reclaiming her courage. The shadow had not reappeared in the hallway or on the fire escape, but its presence lingered like a whisper she could feel even when alone. Lucy sat beside her every morning, offering support and encouragement. We can't ignore it, Lucy said. It's still out there. Waiting. Maya nodded. I know. Feel it. Even when it's gone, it's listening. I have to be ready. Vanessa, Maya's mother, tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, making breakfast and reminding Maya to do her homework. You're stronger than you realize, she said one morning, carrying a plate of pancakes. Just remember to take breaks. Don't let fear control your life. Miss Ellie, too, continued to watch over her. Caution and courage must go together, she said, her voice serious. You've learned that the hard way. But there are still lessons to learn. Your music is a gift, and gifts often attract attention you cannot anticipate. Maya felt the weight of those words. Her music had drawn the shadow, yes, but it was clear it could attract more. She had to be vigilant, focused, and careful. A less extreme event followed one afternoon. Maya and Lucy were in the living room, practicing a duet for the school talent show. Their music floated through the apartment, gentle and confident. For the first time in days, Maya felt a semblance of normalcy. The neighbors paused in their routines, listening quietly. Mr. Jacobs, who had been notoriously irritable, nodded subtly. Even Mrs. Turner smiled faintly, closing her door quietly to enjoy the melody. The apartment felt alive again, filled with music rather than tension. But the peace did not last long. Late that evening, as Maya practiced alone, the lights flickered violently. The familiar sensation of being watched returned, prickling the back of her neck. Then she heard it. A soft, deliberate tapping at the apartment door. Her fingers froze above the piano keys. The sound was unmistakable, intentional, patient, and deliberate. "Not again," she whispered, her voice trembling. Lucy, who had stayed behind for a brief study session, grabbed her hand. Miss Ellie, already on the phone with Vanessa, stepped toward the door cautiously. "We'll handle this calmly," she said. "Whatever is out there, we must not panic." The tapping grew louder, almost like a rhythm, matching the beat of Maya's racing heart. And then came a new sound, a low guttural hum that seemed to vibrate through the floorboards. It was coming from somewhere in the walls. Maya's fear intensified. This was not the same shadow she had faced before. This presence was closer, more personal, more invasive. The extreme event occurred suddenly. The apartment door burst open. Not violently, not with a crash, but with a force that sent Maya's music sheets scattering across the floor. A dark figure stepped inside. Its hooded head tilted slightly, revealing the faint outline of a mask similar to the last encounter. But this one was larger, more intimidating, its movements deliberate and controlled. "You play well," the figure said, its voice low and distorted, echoing off the walls. "But are you ready for what comes next?" Maya's hands flew to the keys, instinctively playing a sharp, defensive melody. Notes slammed into the room like waves, echoing off every surface. The figure paused, almost studying her, as if testing her resolve. Miss Ellie moved in front of Maya, cane held firmly. "You cannot intimidate a child with music," she said firmly. The figure tilted its head, almost contemplatively. "I am not here to harm. But others will come. And your music, it will draw them." Maya's chest tightened. "Others? Who?" The figure didn't answer directly. It simply raised one long, slender hand toward the piano and then withdrew it slowly. A faint vibration filled the room, as if the presence itself were resonating with her music. "You must learn to control your gift," it said. "Not everyone who listens will be kind. And soon you will see why courage alone is not enough." Before Maya could respond, the figure retreated, slipping back into the shadows of the hallway. The door slowly clicked shut behind it, leaving Maya trembling and clutching the piano keys for support. Lucy held her close. "Are you okay?" she asked. That was terrifying." Maya nodded, though her hands were still shaking. "I think it's not just testing me anymore. It's warning me. Something bigger is coming." Miss Ellie sighed, gripping her cane tightly. "Yes, and we need to prepare. Your music is powerful, yes, but it will attract attention beyond even this building. There are forces, people, or beings that notice things like this. You must be careful, Maya." A less extreme moment followed later that night. Vanessa sat with Maya at the kitchen table sipping tea. "You faced something extraordinary," she said. "But you're stronger than you know. Just remember to rest. Even courage needs breaks." Maya nodded slowly. "I will, Mom. But I can't ignore it. I feel it coming. And I don't want to be unprepared." Lucy chimed in, her voice determined. "We'll figure it out together. We'll make sure she's safe and we'll find out who or what is listening. We won't let it get out of control." The atmosphere in the apartment remained tense but more focused. Maya understood now that her gift, her music, was more than a talent. It was a responsibility. It could protect her, but it could also attract danger she had yet to understand fully. And then, just as the night seemed calm, a new extreme event struck. The building shook violently, a deep, resonating vibration that rattled windows and walls. Maya's hands flew to the piano keys instinctively, trying to counter the vibrations with music. The neighbors shouted and scrambled to their doorways, fear flashing across their faces. The walls themselves seemed to pulse with the energy of something enormous, something unseen but powerful. The shadow, or whatever force had been watching, was no longer content with testing. It was escalating. Maya pressed her hands harder against the piano, playing faster, louder, stronger. The music became a shield, a barrier against the overwhelming force pressing down on the apartment. Lucy held her tight, whispering encouragement. Miss Ellie gritted her teeth, holding her cane like a weapon, as the building trembled around them. And as the vibrations subsided, leaving shattered plaster and scattered papers in their wake, Maya realized a terrifying truth. Her music had not only drawn the shadow, it had awakened something far larger, something more dangerous. And this time she would not be able to face it alone. The morning after the building shook felt like the calm before a storm, but everyone at Maple Grove Apartments knew better. Maya didn't sleep well, her mind replaying the vibrations, the low hum, and the presence of the shadow that had escalated its actions overnight. Every creak of the floorboards sounded louder than usual, every rustle of wind against the windows like a warning. Lucy arrived early, backpack slung over her shoulder. "Are you ready?" she asked softly. Maya nodded, though her hands still shook. I have to be. It's coming, Lucy. I can feel it." Vanessa brought breakfast to the kitchen table, her hands steady but her eyes shadowed with worry. "Whatever happens, you won't face it alone," she said. "You have us. And you have your music. That's your strength." Miss Ellie shuffled in, cane tapping the floor. "Strength alone won't protect you. Strategy, awareness, courage, and music all must work together. You've faced tests before, but today, it will be a challenge like none you've seen." The neighbors had begun to take notice of Maya's unusual resilience and the strange occurrences in the building. For the first time, even Mr. Jacobs seemed respectful, standing at his doorway quietly, listening as Maya played a soft, steady melody. The music was deliberate, calm, controlled, and full of intent. It was her first step toward preparing for whatever was coming. A less extreme moment passed as Maya practiced, letting the familiar notes flow through her fingers. Lucy hummed along softly, providing a grounding presence. For a brief moment, the apartment felt safe, filled with the warmth of music and friendship instead of fear. But the reprieve was short-lived. Late in the afternoon, a sharp banging erupted from the fire escape outside Maya's window. The sound rattled the glass, echoing through the apartment. Maya froze, fingers hovering above the piano. Her heart pounded like a drum in her chest. "It's back," she whispered. Miss Ellie stepped forward. "It's testing you. Not just you, but everyone who is here. Everyone who cares about your music. Stay strong, Maya. You have to respond with courage, not fear." The shadow appeared again, this time more distinct. Its hooded form was taller, broader, almost completely blocking the view of the hallway from the window. Its presence was oppressive, but it moved deliberately, almost rhythmically, in response to Maya's music. "You cannot hide from what listens," the voice said again, low and hollow. "And now you will learn." Maya's hands trembled, but she pressed them to the keys. This time she did not play defensively. She played strategically, deliberately, each note calculated to respond to the shadow's movements. The melody twisted and turned like a conversation. Questions, warnings, statements of courage. Lucy leaned close. "You're doing it. You're talking to it with your music." Miss Ellie nodded, pride shining in her eyes despite the tension. "Yes, music is a language. And Maya is beginning to speak fluently." But the extreme event arrived faster than anyone expected. A sudden crash of glass came from the broken window, and a cold wind whipped through the apartment. The shadow surged forward, pressing against the glass, its movements quick and deliberate. Maya's hands flew over the keys, trying to counter its energy, but the force was overwhelming. The piano trembled, the apartment shook, and the neighbors pressed themselves against the walls in fear. "You must be careful," Miss Ellie shouted. "Do not let it frighten you. It feeds on fear." Maya's fingers moved faster, louder, more confidently. She poured all her emotion into the melody. Fear, courage, love, and defiance all blended together in a forceful, protective wave. The shadow recoiled slightly, as if startled by the strength of her music. But then a new development escalated the danger. Another shadow appeared from the stairwell, a smaller figure, moving with the same intent but more aggressive, more urgent. Maya's eyes widened. She realized the first shadow had not come alone this time. The second one mirrored the first, but its presence was darker, more menacing, responding to her every note with a warped counter-melody. Lucy clutched her arm. "Two of them? How are you supposed to deal with two?" Maya's chest tightened. Her fingers hovered over the keys, her mind racing. She had never faced anything like this before. She realized that strategy and courage were not enough. She needed to truly understand the rhythm of their responses, the way they reacted to fear, to strength, to melody. Miss Ellie gritted her teeth. You can do it, Maya. You have to trust your instincts. Music is not just sound, it's energy. Control it and you can protect yourself and others. Maya inhaled deeply, letting her mind focus. She began to play a melody unlike any she had before. The notes intertwined, rising and falling with the movements of the two shadows. The smaller one hesitated, its movements jerky, uncertain. The larger one pressed forward but slowed as if confused. It was a battle of wills, not of violence. Music against presence, courage against fear. Vanessa and Lucy leaned close, both offering encouragement. The neighbors, now fully invested, watched in silence. Even the usually cranky Mr. Jacob seemed captivated, understanding that this was no ordinary situation. Minutes stretched into eternity. Maya's hands flew over the keys, her mind focused entirely on the counter-melodies, the rhythms of the shadows. Slowly, she began to sense a pattern of vulnerability. The shadows reacted to discordant notes, hesitated at harmonies, and recoiled at expressions of pure, unbroken emotion. With one final decisive wave of music, Maya struck a chord that resonated through the entire apartment, through the walls, through the building itself. The larger shadow faltered, then retreated backward, disappearing into the hallway. The smaller shadow hesitated, then vanished as well, leaving the apartment in silence. The extreme danger had passed, but not entirely. Maya's hands trembled as she lifted them from the keys, her chest heaving. Lucy hugged her tightly. You did it. You really did it. Miss Ellie approached, cane tapping gently on the floor. Yes, but this is just the beginning. They will return. And next time they will come prepared. Maya looked at her piano, her fingers still tingling from the intensity of her performance. I understand now, she whispered. My music, it's more than sound. It's strength. It's protection. It's me. Vanessa placed a hand on her shoulder. And you're not alone. We'll face it together. You, Lucy, me, Miss Ellie, we're a team. The neighbors, finally understanding the gravity of the events, nodded in quiet respect. The complaints about noise and too loud melodies were gone. Now they were witnesses to something extraordinary, something that demanded courage, empathy, and unity. But even as the apartment settled into an uneasy calm, Maya could feel it again. A faint, almost imperceptible vibration in the walls. The presence was still near, still listening, still testing her. And she knew with absolute certainty that the final challenge had not yet come. The night had settled over Maple Grove Apartments like a heavy blanket, but sleep was impossible. Maya sat at her piano, fingers hovering above the keys, feeling the weight of everything that had happened. The vibrations, the shadows, the whispered warnings, they were all reminders that her music was no ordinary sound. It was power. It was protection. It was responsibility. Lucy sat beside her, notebook in hand. Tonight we have to be ready, she said softly. We don't know what they'll do next, but we have to face it. Together. Maya nodded, swallowing hard. Her mother, Vanessa, stood by the window, glancing out nervously but ready to step in if needed. Miss Ellie leaned against the piano, cane at the ready, eyes sharp and alert. Even the neighbors, alerted to the danger by the prior events, had stayed close, peering from doorways and windows, their earlier complaints about noise replaced by concern and cautious curiosity. For the first time, Maya realized that the entire building had become part of her audience. Not just for her music, but for the challenge she faced. She drew in a deep breath and pressed her fingers to the keys, beginning softly, deliberately, letting the melody flow like a river. It was steady, calm, and confident, full of purpose. The shadows appeared almost immediately. Not one but three now, larger than before, moving in rhythm with the music, reacting to the notes as if they were alive. Maya's heart pounded, but she refused to falter. She had learned from the previous encounters. Fear only empowered them. Courage, control, and clarity of heart were her weapons. You must stay focused, Miss Ellie whispered. Let the music speak. Control it. Don't let it control you. Maya nodded. She began to weave a complex melody, full of harmonies and counterpoints, each note calculated to test the shadows' reactions. They moved in unison, circling the apartment like predators studying their prey, yet each one hesitated when Maya struck certain chords. She realized the key was not force but understanding, understanding how they responded to sound, emotion, and intent. Lucy watched intently. "You're doing it," she whispered. "You're communicating. You're showing them who you are through your music." The shadows recoiled slightly, as if surprised by the strength and clarity of her melody. But then the extreme event occurred. The largest shadow lunged suddenly, its movements faster and more aggressive than before. The apartment shook as if it were alive, rattling windows and throwing music sheets across the room. Maya's hands flew across the keys, playing chords sharp enough to cut through the darkness, yet full of emotion and resolve. "You cannot run," the shadow's hollow voice echoed. "You cannot hide." Maya's voice shook, but she sang softly along with her music, adding another layer of power to her notes. The shadows hesitated, disturbed by the combination of sound and courage. Miss Ellie tapped her cane against the floor. "Keep going, Maya. Show them that your heart is stronger than fear." Maya felt a surge of energy. Her music became a wave of light and sound, resonating through every corner of the apartment, through the walls and out into the hallway. The shadows began to falter, their movements jerky and uncertain. They were responding not just to the notes, but to the intent behind them, the honesty and strength of Maya's heart. Then, as if compelled, the shadows began to merge into a single form, larger than before, more solid but still featureless. Its hollow eyes bore into Maya's soul, yet she did not back down. She pressed harder, faster, letting the full force of her music fill the room. "You are ready," the voice said, softer now, almost reverent. Maya's hands froze for a moment, stunned. The shadows slowly began to shift, dissolving into fragments of light and sound that hovered in the air like sparks. The single presence that remained seemed less threatening, almost protective. "You have learned," it said, its hollow eyes now glowing faintly, "that courage and heart can shape power. That fear cannot bind the truth of music. You have faced what listens, and you have prevailed." Maya's chest heaved, her fingers trembling but no longer afraid. She realized something astonishing. The presence that had haunted her, the shadow that had tested her, was not evil. It was a guardian of music, an entity that sought honesty and courage in those who wielded it. It had tested her to see if her music was worthy, if her heart was true. Lucy's eyes widened. "So it was never trying to hurt you," she whispered. Maya shook her head, relief flooding through her. "It wanted to see if I was ready, if I could handle the responsibility." Miss Ellie's eyes glimmered with pride. "And you have. Not just with courage but with heart. You've learned the most important lesson. Power without empathy is meaningless. Your music touches lives because it carries truth." The extreme event had passed, leaving a profound calm in its wake. Maya's fingers rested gently on the piano keys, the room filled with a soft, lingering resonance. The neighbors, now completely captivated, approached cautiously, whispering words of awe and respect. Mr. Jacobs nodded, no trace of irritation left. Mrs. Turner's eyes were wide with admiration. Even the Harris brothers exchanged looks of disbelief. Vanessa hugged Maya tightly. "I'm so proud of you," she said, tears in her eyes. "You faced something unimaginable and came out stronger." Lucy grinned. "You did it, Maya. You really did it." Miss Ellie placed a hand on Maya's shoulder. "Remember this night. Remember what courage, empathy, and heart can do. You have proven yourself, but also reminded everyone here that music, honest music, is more powerful than any fear." Maya smiled, her heart full. She looked at her piano, understanding finally that it was not just an instrument, but a conduit for courage, for truth, and for connection. Her music had faced the shadows, overcome fear, and inspired awe and respect in those around her. As the residents of Maple Grove Apartments returned to their routines, a newfound appreciation for Maya and her gift filled the building. No longer would they complain about her music being too loud. They had seen firsthand its power and its beauty. And in the quiet that followed, Maya played once more. Not out of fear, not to defend herself, but simply because she loved the music, because it was her voice, and because she now understood its potential to touch hearts and protect those she cared about. From the shadows, a faint, almost imperceptible glow lingered for a moment longer, a final acknowledgement from the guardian of music that had tested her. Then it vanished, leaving only the melody in the room and the knowledge that Maya had passed her greatest test. She had faced what listens, And she had prevailed.